Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
It's almost time for summer and people to go to visit one of Idaho's 30 state parks. But a year after the Parks Department's budget was dramatically cut, how are they faring? The state of Idaho's parks. Stay tuned. Dialogue is next. Hello, I'm Joan Cartan-Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. In 2010, Governor Butch Otter proposed eliminating the Idaho Parks and Recreation Department. When that idea failed, the governor and the legislature slashed the Parks Department budget by about 80%. They wanted Idaho State Parks to be more self-sufficient. So the Parks and Recreation Board laid off 25 full-time staffers, raised fees, and looked for new ways to increase revenue. But 1 year later, has it been enough? Idaho State Parks are not only a trust to preserve scenic values and to provide recreation, they're also an economic engine for local communities across the state. So under this new business model and with yet another cut in the state appropriation, can Idaho State Parks survive? Joining me now to answer that question is the director of Idaho's Parks and Recreation Department, Nancy Merrill. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
And of course, we want to have you join the conversation. Give us a call, toll free at 1-800-973-9800. So how are Idaho State Parks doing?
I think Idaho State Parks are doing fine. We are slim and we are surviving, but we are open and we're open for business, and that is good. Where the other state parks around the country are closing, Idaho State Parks have remained open. That's great.
What fees in general went up?
You know, we raised all of our camping fees, all of our sites, and around between $2 to $5, depending on where the location was. And we also raised our entrance fees from $1 per day for our daily passes to $5 for a year pass. So it's still in the affordable range. We want to make sure that we don't outprice our people in Idaho and our citizens. So that's what.
How did you figure out that breaking point between getting enough revenue in but not pricing people out of the market?
Well, we did a lot of studies. We went out and evaluated what we had and where the breaking point was and that point of diminishing return. And the one thing that we were very cognizant of is that price point, that we did not want to outprice people. And this seems to be working at this point.
Now you've added some new services in many of our states. Wi-Fi service was one of those I thought was an interesting addition.
You know, Joan, one of the things that we've had to do and think about across the nation, not only in Idaho, is how do we compete? How do we compete with the technology age out here, and how do we still provide the services that we need to provide? When these great big rigs come rolling into the parks, one of the first things they ask is, do you have Wi-Fi? And you know, we had never considered that before, but we did a few trials on it and it worked. It was highly successful, and so we're looking at putting them in all our parks.
So the first 20 minutes is free, and then you pay for the service.
Then you pay a service after that, correct.
You've also increased some fees on those premium camping sites. Those nice, the best places in the park to camp are a little bit more expensive.
Yes, you know, when you go on a cruise or you're staying in a hotel in a resort and you want that pristine view across the lake or out onto the ocean, you pay a little more for that. And that's what we've done here in our parks. When they have a pristine place or a view, then they're a little bit more choices.
Is it enough? Now you had about a $2 million shortfall coming into this last budget cycle. You were able to get money from the RV fund, the folks, that dedicated fund. That
dedicated fund that goes for maintenance and operation. We used some of those dollars in order to keep the parks alive and to keep them maintained and provide the services. And those dollars were used only in the parks that had the recreational vehicle sites. And so we used them where it was direct relationship on that. We will have that $2 million shortfall that we're looking to fill. And so we're looking at all kinds of ways to turn the rocks over and find additional funding.
Is that your biggest fear right now, that you won't be able to fill that gap? Can Idaho's parks be self-sufficient?
There has never been a park in the United States that's ever been able to do that. And if anybody's going to do it, Idaho's going to do it. We'll be the first. We're working really hard towards that. there's a balance in Idaho citizens. There's folks that say, you know, by jing, those my tax dollars, my land, I want my money to go to Parks and Rec and preserve and conserve our natural resources here. There's other folks who say, I never go to a park. I like to cruise. I like to fly out of here and get out of here. And I don't want my money going to parks. I want it going someplace else. So we have two different philosophies that we have to balance here, and we're trying to do that with our funding. We're trying to find dedicated funding sources that will be able to go into our parks to maintain and keep us alive.
Let me ask you about Dvorak. That was one of the parks that there was some talk about closing it. That didn't pan out. But tell me, what's the status of Dvorak now, and
that's a great success story. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
That is one of those areas where a highly depressed area in the middle of the state. The economy was bad in that time, and closing a park would have been devastating to the community of Orofino and the surrounding areas of that. The grocery stores, the gas stations where people would locate and come as they came to the parks. So we partnered with the county commissioners. We spent a lot of time in that community with their economic development folks and with the county commissioners, and seeing there's got to be a way to keep this park open and keep it going. And so by partnering, we were able to keep the parks open. The county put in a little bit, the state put in a little bit, the Marine officers put in a little, Sheriff's Department put in a little bit, everybody does their part, and the park is open today. And so that's one of those success stories of everybody working together.
Well, let me ask you about Cataldo, because it's a beautiful area, but it's an historic site. But it was also another one of those that doesn't look like it could generate enough revenue to keep itself open.
One of my favorite places, one of my favorite parks. The historic value of that old building is you can't put a price on it. Working with the tribe and trying to find ways to keep that park open has been also great. We opened the Sacred Encounters, hopefully coming in October, which will bring people to the museum area that has been renovated in the visitor center. But we are also embarking on some new ideas in that park. It has been used very little for weddings, but it's a beautiful site, and so we're going to start promoting the weddings in that park. Also, we're going to do a little bit better on the tours that come in and promoting the tours as they bring bus loads of folks in there. And so another thing that we haven't done as well as we can do is the collections. And so we're going to be starting to put electronic rangers in where we can't afford to put seasonals in or staff in. Will generate some revenue by doing a better job at collecting the revenue that comes into those parks.
Well, if you would, for someone who hasn't seen an electronic ranger, could you describe?
Sure.
And do they actually wear the hat?
No, and they're not dressed in those brown either. You know, it's just a little pay station where you can put your credit card in. Today you put money in an envelope, and we have to send somebody out to gather those dollars. They have to reconcile them, and they have to go to the bank. You can put your credit card in, you can pay by cash, you get your ticket, it goes on your window, and the rangers know that you've paid when you've come through the gate. A much more efficient way of collecting dollars and keeping track.
Funding those efficiencies, that's one of the goals you've had as director. The vendor system for registration of ATVs and boats and all that, that's changing.
We're looking at being more efficient again and finding better ways to take care of our dollars. One of the things when we began this process, when I was hired, is look for a better way to do government and to be more cognizant of how you collect the dollars and what you do with them. When we register today, we are back in the Stone Age about writing on tablets because we're in a triplicate form with the vendors all over the state of Idaho. We are getting inaccurate information. Some information's not getting there. The dollars that are collected are not coming in a timely manner, so it's not getting back out to the counties for the projects that need to be done. So we're embarking on a new program this next year. It'll take us a whole year while we go out to the communities. We'll be going all over the state with on-the-road shows and meeting with the communities, the vendors, the legislators, the communities, and explaining to them how our registration system will work. Today, we have for a year and a half been doing online registration. You can go online today in your jammies and register your motorboat, your snowmobiles and such there. And it's worked. It's a working system, but we have also a lot of other ways to do it. What we're going to do is narrow it down to online registration. That means that if you have a favorite store that you go and register your vehicle today, that if that store owner wants to provide the service with his own computer and printer in that store, he can still do so. People can still go in. He can put a sign in his window that says, you can register here. People can go in and register if they forgot to register at home and still get their certificate. We'll mail the sticker out, and then they will be able to charge a convenience fee of their own for the use and for that service. So we're just beginning that process. I'm sure we'll have hiccups along the way, and we'll learn a lot as we go through this, but we will engage the communities and the public before we roll it out.
Part of the slimming down and narrowing down was the staff. You had to lose 25 full-time staff members and a third of your seasonal. How has that impacted state's parks?
Well, it was a shock, to say the least, and it's put a lot of stress on our rangers and our people, both our support team and in the field. But I will tell you this, that they're resilient, and they've done some incredible things as far as trying to stay up with the number of people that come through our parks. When you imagine that you've got 4 million people coming through your living room every year, is what we kind of think that we are, the outdoor living room of Idaho. We have a lot of things to do and things to take care of. And it's a stressful period of time when our camps are open, and that one thing we want to make sure is we take care of the public's health and safety. And we need people to do that. And so we use our seasonals and our volunteers. We have a tremendous group of volunteers out there that come into our parks, stay during there, they camp and help take care of it. And without them, we could not survive.
I had one viewer send a question, is how can Idaho run a world-class park system largely on the kindness and passion of volunteers?
Well, we couldn't do it without the kindness and passion of volunteers, that is for sure. But everybody has to do their part, and that's where you'll see communities stepping up to the plate. You see Eagle Scouts helping. You'll see we've engaged the prisoners. We're just trying to be as innovative as we possibly can. And
you can't do it with all volunteers.
We can't, and that's why we hire seasonals for a particular period of time in which they work from point A to point B, and when the parks are closed, they're not there. That's a more efficient system. We can't hire the full-time people and keep them on, but we can hire the seasonals.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Eagle State Park. That's
sure.
That's you know, as a former Eagle, you obviously, this is a project that's near and dear to your heart. Let's talk a little bit. We have some computer animation that was designed to let people see what it's going to look like.
Correct.
So tell us about this, what this is going to be.
Well, this started in 2006 with a master plan, and I was mayor at that point and was appointed to serve as a chairman for that master planning. Little did I know that I would have the opportunity to serve as director and help facilitate this. But in 2006, this underdeveloped park in the middle of the Treasure Valley is 540 acres. It's connected with the Boise to River trails, Lucky Peak to Snake River. It passes right through this park. So it is a great treasure for the Treasure Valley. Right now we have cattle that are out there in the fields and drain ditches that are running through it, and a very small amount that is developed. So we embarked upon this planning process that would complement city parks but not compete with the surrounding ones. It would provide camping. You would be able to go and have interpretive centers. We work with the Fish and Game. We'll bring kids outdoors. We'll have the outdoor skating rinks, pavilions for groups and business corporations, and many other things. Equestrian trails that are out there with equestrians. And so we have a lot of things that are going kayaking, boating, and biking. But it takes money and it takes time to do that. One of the things that we have out here is we have resources, and our legislature realized that there are resources in that park, and it's in the Treasure Valley, and so by building lakes and ponds, we could use the gravel from that to also build roads. And so while we are building those lakes and ponds, and when they're reclaimed, they will have campgrounds around them, and they'll have fishing and boating experiences within those lakes and ponds. So that's what we'll be doing. At the beginning, we just had the first groundbreaking on the first 20-acre pond or lake that we have out there, and we'll use those resources to help fund and build the infrastructure, put the money back into the park.
So you're essentially selling the gravel. A North Dakota company is mining the gravel for roads and taking it out, and then the money from that is going to go help pay for the rest of the park as it builds along.
Yes, that was the mandate that we received, is make this a self-sustaining park, build it with the resources that are there in the ground. And so that is what we're doing with that. It just happens to coincide with that Highway 16 project, which is just 2 miles down the road. So it's a very good time to be able to use those resources to build the roads and also to fund the park.
So it's exciting to see some growth.
It is. It's very exciting to see the growth. We put the $3 million bridge in a year and a half ago, and it came in under budget and under time, which opened it up and would move traffic to the State Street location and not conflict with cars and trucks and gravel trucks. So we're very excited that this first pond is as far away from neighbors and from the activities that we possibly can. So this first one we're going to be watching very carefully as to how is it going to interrupt the activities that we already have going there, because we have a lot of activities going in the park. We'll be watching that very carefully and how we work this through.
We had someone ask us about the entrance. When is the entrance going to get built?
The entrance is built. It's there, the light is there, the bridge is there, and that will be used as a construction road entrance until that park is built, so we don't conflict.
Let's get to our first phone caller. Bob in Post Falls. Bob. Go ahead. Bob? Oh, let me try this again. It's being, here we go.
Yeah,
Bob?
I'm from Post Falls. I just took a 5-day tour. Of parks from Priest Lake to City of Rocks.
Wow.
And I wanted to thank the Parks Department for a fine job, particularly in McCall at Ponderosa State Park. An interesting thing I found was the joint effort between federal and state down at City of Rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there more joint projects going on?
Thanks, Bob, for asking that. Yes, we do have partners, and the National Park Service is one of them at that City of Rocks. That's a great partner that we have there. And it certainly helps us keep that open and running. We have a couple others, the Dworshak State Park, the Lucky Peak State Park, and the Cascade State Park are all partners with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Corps of Engineers. And so by partnering with our federal and state partners, we can spread the dollars a little better and also the staff a little more, and to be able to put those things in. I don't know if you got through Cascade, but there's some new campgrounds and new sites up there that are going on also. So yeah, I'm really happy that you were able to visit that many.
Well, actually, we have a map up that kind of shows the wide variety and location of Idaho's state parks. So for those who are listening to this on the radio, you can check it out on our website, the link to the Parks Permanent. But it is pretty extraordinary from Priest Lake to Bear Lake.
It is.
There's a wide variety of different kinds. Let's get to our next phone caller. Francis in Pocatello. Francis. There we go. So he's there?
Hello.
There
yes,
we go.
ma'am.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. The question I would like to ask is to the lady that I'm talking to. Well, does she go camping, and the people that pay to use campgrounds, where is that money going? And also, that's really nice. The gentleman that just called in was saying all the parks that he's went to. I live in southeastern Idaho. I go to Island Park or Spencer. Why isn't anything ever done in those states?
What's being done in Harriman and the parks in the east and
well, no, like in Island Park,
right.
Spencer, Idaho. There's beautiful fishing up there, but no one ever. The state, they never care about those little places. They care about up to Boise area, but they never care about these little places. So I'm just wondering, what could you say about that?
Well, thank you for asking. In fact, we just have a big, huge new project up in Island Park area for this next year with Henry's Lake. There'll be a whole new campground up there. And I don't know if you had a chance to visit with Harriman State Park, but if you go in there and look at
we have some great pictures of Harriman from the wintertime, because that's a great place.
Harriman's a beautiful place, and the fishing, and that's up there with the Scoville Center. We have riding camps, and we do some fly fishing camps up there also with that. So that's a heavily used area. And then as we come down to Island Park, we're putting in some new pathways, and we put in some little cabins that are in there. And so and then Massacre is upgrading some of their electrical that we have in those parks. So we're putting some emphasis in that area in the eastern Idaho. And they're just, they're not necessarily on lakes, but they certainly have the fishing and the camping and the wonderful areas there for people to come. And Island Park particularly is heavily used, as well as Three Island. And so we're putting emphasis in those parks also.
I'm going to ask our director, Alf, if you could put the map up one more time of the state parks. if you look down Eastern Idaho, there's a lot actually. In
There are.
My old stomping ground back there. And now, Frances, you had a couple other questions. One of them was, do you camp?
Yes, I do camp. I do camp, and I actually have an old ATV that we've ridden around with our kids for years, and a little bit of snowmobiling at the same time. And so I enjoy. That's one of the things when I was put in as new director, that I made an effort to visit every state park within 1 year, from Priest Lake in northern Idaho to Bear Lake in eastern Idaho. So, in fact, our board meeting this next July will be in Bear Lake and Montpelier. So we'll be over in your neck of the woods.
All right. Frances, thank you for your phone call. I guess the one other question she had was, what happens to those fees? So I put either swipe my credit card or I put my money in the little envelope. Where does that money go?
Where does that money go? That money goes directly back into the park funds to help maintain the facilities. Once again, when we have all those people coming through our parks, we have to upgrade, or not necessarily upgrade, but take care of the broken restrooms and the showers and the shelters and the campsites, the tables, replacing those things as they wear out. So those dollars go directly back into maintaining the parks. We're not a money-making business. We just want to maintain and take care of the natural resources.
Let me ask about the weather. It's been a very damp spring.
Yes.
How has that impacted state parks?
This has been, and we've looked at our same time last year, and we're down about 10% this year from what we had from last year from the use in our campground. So we're a little concerned. We are very much driven by our usage, and we hope that it warms up really well and people get out there.
But not too fast, because the amount of water is going to be an issue.
That is true. We don't want it to rain too fast or to melt too fast. You're right.
You were saying Bear Lake, they might not have any beaches this year.
Bear Lake, the water is rising fast at Bear Lake, and if that does happen, then we lose our beaches. And so the beaches are what's the fun part to come to. And we have the same problem over there at Three Island. There's water that rises in there. We don't want the flooding in that. We have had some up at Priest Lake and at Hayburn. So,
okay. But there's beautiful biking available, and
biking and hiking and our trails and a continuation of that.
There's lots to do. Now we're rapidly running out of time, and I want to ask you about the land swap of Billings Creek.
Okay.
JFAC, the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee, is looking at potentially swapping the land that the Parks Department has now with land inside Ponderosa State Park. Could you explain that?
Yeah, let me see if I can run this through so it's explainable. We have three agencies. We have the Department of Parks, Department of Lands, and we have the University of Idaho. Department of our Idaho Parks owns Ponderosa Park, manages that, and in the center of that, we have about a 7-acre piece that is being leased by the University of Idaho, belongs to Department of Lands. Department of Lands owns that. Down in the Billingsley Creek area, we have a piece of property by the name of Vardis Fisher that has a fish hatchery on it and some water rights in there. Does not have any recreational, cultural, or historic sites in that area. So we have an opportunity to do a land trade. Idaho Parks would trade the Vardis Fisher piece to the Department of Lands. Department of Lands would trade the Ponderosa piece to the Department of Parks. That would enable the university to remain in the Ponderosa Park and continue it as the science field office, and then the Department of Lands would sell that piece of property down at Vardis Fisher in Billingsley Creek, and that money would go into the endowments.
Endowments, of course, then paying for schools.
Endowments for the schools, correct.
So what's the impetus for doing it now?
Timing, I believe, the University of Idaho pays lease to the Idaho Department of Lands, and the Department of Lands is embarking, with the lease agreements that they have with all the cottage sites, also encompasses this land here with this Moss Center. And so those lease rates are going up. It makes it difficult for the university, and so this is a good time to look at that trade.
In general, in the big picture, in the long term, do you see the state all the parks eventually moving to the point where you are not going to need any general fund appropriations? Is it really possible in the long term? And should we not help fund our state parks? Is not something, perhaps parks are something government should actually support?
That's a philosophy that different people have different opinions about. As far as can we do it, we are moving towards it, and we're taking steps to do that. The best thing that for us as a park system would be on dedicated funds. to not have to be dependent onto general funds, and then we can make sure that we can be sustainable and take care of the needs as they come along, and not as the economy changes and as we have gone through this recession, as because parks or schools or prisons or health and welfare, we know where we'll fit in that pile. So the best thing for us to be would be on dedicated funds.
And which park in the state do you think most people don't know about that they really should maybe discover?
You know, I will go back to the old Mission. If they haven't, up in Cataldo, if they have not been to the old Mission and ridden along that Coeur d'Alene Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes and stopped in to see that old Mission, and particularly when we get the Sacred Encounters up there, that's an experience that everybody needs to have.
Well, especially if Idaho, if you're not familiar with Cataldo, you should.
Yeah, exactly.
How about in eastern Idaho?
In eastern Idaho, gosh, you know, I love the Harriman State Park. I love what they've done over there, and it's just pretty incredible when you walk in and see the history of the railroad family that has been there, and those trumpeting swans and the fly fishing and the yurts and the things that they do over in that park. That's a pretty amazing park.
And how about for folks in southeastern Idaho?
In southeastern Idaho, you know, we need that Bear Lake and Thousand Springs. Thousand Springs. It's hard to go to Thousand Springs, Hagerman Valley, without seeing that crystal water and thinking we have an amazing land here.
Is it the diversity of Idaho state parks that make them so special?
You know, you think about the Bruno Sand Dunes, and you to the Priest Lakes, to the historic Cataldo, the old missions, what goes on at the Three Island Crossing, all the things. You can do anything. The rock climbing at City of Rocks, you go from high desert to lakes. It's amazing what we have in Idaho.
No, we're about to, we've almost run out of time tonight, but we'll be talking in our Web Extra about there's new regulations for off-highway, I keep saying off-road, off-highway vehicle users, new education restrictions if you're 15 or under, and so we'll talk about that in our Web Extra.
Great.
So for viewers, if you want to watch that, you can check it out on our website, on our Facebook page, also on YouTube on the next day. Thank you, Director Merrill. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for allowing me. I love Idaho.
Thank you. And of course, we do have lots more information about Idaho State Parks. You can find it on the Dialogue website. Go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. And as I said, you'll find our Dialogue Web Extra there. So I invite you to join the discussion on our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you here next time on Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, become a friend on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.